Greetings, everyone. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live here on a Sunday night, Sunday fun day, April 6th, 2025. As everyone trickles in following the Sabres 6-3 victory tonight down at KeyBank Center over the Boston Bruins. On your way in, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button on your way in. Get that out of the way now. If you're watching on X, Twitter, come on over to YouTube. The chat usually fills up. There's a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to get right in it, but definitely hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. You can find this podcast, The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, leave a 5-star review. I'm your host, Kris Baker, here as always with our intrepid Buffalo Sabres reporter for The Athletic. That is Matthew Fairburn. You can find all of Matthew's work at theathletic.com/Sabres. Lot to dive into tonight. Let's just get right to it, shall we? Sabres pick up another victory on home ice, defeating the Bruins 6-3. They're now winners of 9 of their last 12 games. 6 straight victories at home, Matthew Fairburn. 15-4 in their last 19 at KeyBank Center. So kind of figuring out how to play well at home are these this iteration of the Buffalo Sabres. But man, oh man, how fun would it be if this team was actually in the playoff hunt? But instead, we're talking about how they've staved off elimination for at least another day. Just quick rundown for the game before I pass it over to you, Matthew. Tage Thompson gets the hat trick tonight. He's up to 43 goals on the year, I believe. Rasmus Dahlin and Alex Tuch each get a goal and an assist. Jason Zucker also scores tonight. Bowen Byram and Peyton Krebs, each with a pair of helpers. UPL called upon to just make 17 saves tonight. Don't want to overreact, Matthew, but I think we should talk about the game a little bit. The Bruins, they're now 1-8-1 in their last 10. A little bit of a different Bruins team that we're used to seeing, but Sabres are definitely clicking, and it's not just the top line, but we should probably talk about that top line, shouldn't we?
The top line has been good, and it is an interesting jumping off point for conversations about this team because more and more, there's questions that they have to answer going into next season. And when you talk about, those stats you just rattled off about 9 of their last 12, right? 15 of their last 19 at home, a 6-game home winning streak. They are playing a lot better. Anybody who is still watching these games night to night sees a much more consistent, better hockey team. But also anybody who has seen any Sabres games in the last 14 years is saying, what about this carries over into next year? You know that all of it doesn't, right? Because if that were the case, they would have broken this drought by now, because they've had a lot of these end of season pushes when the pressure is off, when they can just go out and play river hockey and kind of, loosey-goosey and do their thing. Now, they're not playing totally loosey-goosey, right? They're not part of what's allowing them to play this way is that they're managing the puck better, that they're not making as many mistakes. But just the fact that the pressure's off makes it tough to evaluate. That said, though, the top line is an interesting conversation piece, because I think it's pretty clear that at least as long as Lindy Ruff is the coach, Tage Thompson's going to be a winger. And that changes a lot of the calculus about this roster, doesn't it? Like, Tage Thompson is now a right wing.
And it's not the top line that we thought, too, right? Because Tage Thompson is a wing, but also the other components of that top line.
Right. So, Tage Thompson not being a center, I mean, Lindy Ruff has gone out of his way each of the last 2 nights to bring up the fact that Tage is playing wing and that it's good for him, and that, that breakaway he got tonight, he doesn't get that if he's playing center. He brought it up last night that the move to wing, really helped him. So it's like pretty obvious to me that this is something Ruff thinks works, and I think the on-ice results show it as well. But then you're sitting there and you're like, okay, he's not your number 1 center. Your trade deadline acquisition hasn't played, and
12 games without Josh Norris, right?
12 games in a row. He played 3 games and hasn't played since. So just how significant is the roster work that needs to be done if you don't have a top line center, if you have those question marks at your top two. Now, the good part of it is that Tage Thompson is a difference maker, on your top line. What's interesting is that Zach Benson and Yuri Kulik seem to play really well with Tage Thompson. Like, it seems to be working. But as we discussed, I think on the last show, I don't think you can roll into next season with Zach Benson and Yuri Kulik on your top line and expect to be a legitimate playoff team. And it has nothing to do with how they're playing, and it has a lot more to do with counting on them to, A, repeat what they're doing right now next season, and B, sustain it consistently over the course of an 82-game season when they are, I believe, the two youngest players on the roster. Maybe Ostlund is younger than Kulik. I'm not sure. But I just don't know. I don't know that that's the recipe. And so there is an interesting game here that we have to play, and it's our jobs here on this show to dissect what is real, what is not in this, good stretch of hockey that they've played, and what about it can inform decisions in the offseason. And that top line is definitely an interesting place to start.
Noah Ostlund is about a month older than Yuri Kulik, for the record. Yeah, I guess it's a line that works. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, that Thompson's second goal tonight was the reason that Thompson's a winger and that Kulik's a center. When you look at that line, it's, just Benson can play anywhere. So that's kind of, I think, the asterisk here, right? To your statement, like, how serious of a contender are you with two young guys and your superstar? I think we can call Tage Thompson a superstar at this point, even though he didn't make Team USA for the Four Nations.
He's been pretty good since getting left off that team.
Well, you were hoping that he had a chip on his shoulder, right, with that. But just watching Benson, like, peeling off plays, working the corners, getting to the front of the net. I mean, constantly, what a motor on this kid. He makes any line that he's on, I think, better, and he should be, in theory, more effective next year. And it works. And you could spread out your talent and have some decent line combinations to play with. And it just works. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see what goes on this offseason, because who's here today might not be here tomorrow when it comes to next season. But I think it gives Kevin Adams, on the assumption that Kevin Adams is still the general manager, some flexibility to really look at things. And then when you talk about culture and improving your mix, and you get through those exit interviews, we talked about this the last time we were together, that's where the answers are. That's truly where the answers are with this team. But again, don't want to overreact to them doing this tonight against a Bruins team, but they played a pretty good game yesterday against a pretty good team that had something to play for in Tampa. So they had a nice weekend here. I think the only player that really didn't have a great weekend was Jack Quinn. I mean, he saw his 5-game point streak snap, didn't get a point, saw his ice time kind of reduced. Tonight, you saw some line shuffling going on, right, where Tuck, I think, was flipped with Quinn to go with McLeod and Peterka in the third anyways, right? But we could talk a little bit about that. And also, let's just talk about Sam Lafferty. Can we just give a shout out to Sam Lafferty here? It's like tryouts for him. It's tryout season. I know he's got a contract that goes into next year, but where has this guy been?
Where has this guy been is the question I was going to ask. I mean, where was this in October and November? He is playing much better, right? And I think it has been interesting the last couple of games to see Noah Ostlund between those two players. I know there was some hand-wringing on Friday when he got called up and he's put on the fourth line between those two guys, but it's actually, I haven't minded it. Certainly you're not unleashing all of Ostlund's offensive potential, but he's showing what he can do in the defensive zone. And I think that's earning some trust from Lindy Ruff. And while things are going well, you're not going to break up the top three lines anyways. So maybe you start to wrinkle them in a little bit more, or there's a way to work them in higher in the lineup to see how that works. But I haven't minded it because that line has played pretty well. Lafferty's, kind of going, Malenstein's going, and Ostlund fits the role to the extent that he plays really sound defensive hockey, and he's a pretty competitive player too. So not a bad couple of games from him either. But again, not a guy you're counting on next year, right? I think all of this is important, to say, okay, this is happening, but you can't count on it. Noah Ostlund should be in the AHL next year, and or at least to start. And then you kind of go from there. But there has been some encouraging stuff about this stretch, but there's also a lot that is pretty clearly fool's gold, right? James Reimer has played out of his mind at 37 years old, which has just been, it's been kind of pretty funny to see, right? Like, to all of a sudden, again, where was this?
Where was this guy? Yeah, exactly.
Because he had, he didn't have this sustained stretch of ice time, but he got his games and he was not playing this well, right? He was not really somebody that they could count on. Otherwise, they probably would have played him more. UPL was playing a crazy workload. So you have that, and you have a team that's hot, scoring goals, and you're going to get some of these results. You also have some teams, this Bruins team has kind of packed it in, outside of one line. They were like a one-line team tonight, it felt like. So you do have some of that. You've got, a backup goalie last night. There's all these little things that I think Sabres fans are pretty in tune with, because like I said, they've seen this movie before. This is familiar to them, this late season push when they're already out of it. But I think the key pieces of the team are worth, dissecting a little bit, because they are, I think, to their credit, treating this like an opportunity to, every game is an opportunity to figure out what's going wrong, how to fix it, what it might look like if it's going well. And they haven't mailed it in a season where it would have been pretty easy to, given the way the vibe around this team was for a lot of the year, the uncertainty, over, whether you want to call it legitimate uncertainty or not, fans chanting for the general manager's job, fans in general, being pretty fed up with the on-ice product. They could have packed it in. They could have had one foot out the door, but they're finishing strong. I do think that matters, given where this team has been. I just don't buy too much into the actual results, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does make sense. And look, I know I was kind of bouncing around a little bit. I went right down to the fourth line, but that's how impressive I think Lafferty's been. But I do want to go back up to the top six and kind of continue on where you left off. And because it's alarming that the team is playing this way. And again, I'll say it one more time. I don't want to overreact to just tonight's game against a Boston team that is just, gutted. So many of those guys are going to be playing in Providence in a couple weeks. You know what I mean? But like, the Sabres are doing it without their prized trade deadline acquisition, their highest paid forward. And it presents a little bit of a puzzle of where these guys fit and how the offseason is going to go. We talk about like just when you think, like I've mentioned this before, and I think you agree that Tuck and Zucker seem to have some nice chemistry together. Who's their centerman next year? Maybe it is a Norris if you keep the two young guys with Thompson. And then in the third period, Lindy breaks that lineup. You know what I mean? And they just kind of keep rolling and things look good. But, looking at the numbers tonight, by the way, that Kulik line with Thompson and Benson played by far the most 5-on-5 minutes, almost just shy of 80%, 79.4, Corsi 4%. The Ostlund, Lafferty, Malenstein line, 924 time on ice, 5-on-5, 90.9%. Corsi 4. Again, I like looking at some of those. It kind of tells you, controlling the play, getting pucks to the net. I like that. I like these numbers, but it's going to be an interesting offseason. I don't know. Goaltending. Should we go there? Or should we just opine more on the forwards? Because really the problem I have about keep talking about the forwards is that someone's going to get squeezed out, You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's hard to say who, and we have a lot of time to figure that out. I think I know who gets squeezed up, but we still need to see let's just see the last stretch of games. And I think keep talking about it game to game. But UPL gets back in net tonight. Wasn't the greatest night for goaltenders.
That was tough.
Between
tough
the two
goaltending
Finns.
night at the arena for sure. It was at one point it felt like this game could have got even more high scoring, but just because of the chances that were getting given up, but also, you know, the goaltending was not great. And this is a growing sample size with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Now he's coming in cold in a lot of these starts, right? And early in this game, definitely didn't get a lot of help, right? You know, Peterka handed out a cookie in the neutral zone, and there was just some pretty big chances. But you've got now a goalie making, you know, just under $5 million a year for the next few years, not playing like it. And you have Devin Levi in the AHL. Is he ready to be in the NHL? You know, it's why I think it was like a month ago I was writing about Luukkonen and Levi being a risky proposition and had some pushback on that, but it feels even riskier now. I mean, Levi's playing great. He got his 7th shutout last night in the AHL. He's having a great year down there. I don't know that it's completely out of the question that he goes back down there next year. So does the recent play of Reimer show you that having a capable veteran goaltender here matters? You know, Reimer was like, he's playing great right now. You know, all the credit to him for how he's playing right now. But he was not some sort of like big ticket acquisition. It was $1 million. They waived him at the start of the year. Clearly, you know, they didn't even think that this was a guy that would be capable of, you know, playing second fiddle because they waived him, and nothing really happened to, like, it's not like he lost the job in the preseason, right? He didn't. So that was sort of a premeditated decision, the way I look at it, you know, that they were going to do that. I bring this up because I think of all the criticism Kevin Adams gets, perhaps his biggest issue is, since he's had the job, is goaltending. You know, between the Linus Ullmark situation and then sort of stumbling into Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen last year, bringing up Levi too soon, not once but twice. They have not been able to find the answer. Now they have two pretty capable young goalies in Luukkonen and Levi, but still both unproven at the NHL level consistently, right? Luukkonen did it for a year, and this year that he's putting together is not great. So is this a guy that can start 50 games for you next year? I mean, I don't know that you feel great about that, but I think you find a better version of Reimer.
Yeah.
And maybe you feel, you know, you take some of the workload off of Luukkonen and hope you get, you know, better defensive play in front of him and you get a better version of him. But if you roll the dice on going with Levi again and he's not ready and you've planned your roster around that again, then you end up scrambling. Now you can do it. The Avs did it this year and scrambled and got a couple goals, like kind of reworked their net on the fly. But this is not a general manager that's been adept at reworking things on the fly. So there needs to be a plan. And I think the last month has probably, if not altered that plan, like there's been some new variables introduced.
How's Luukkonen been the past couple of weeks off the ice, practice days? What's your vibe check on his confidence level? What are you seeing from him? Anything? Is he feeling like a little more rested at least, or like mentally just kind of
seems like it?
chill?
I mean, nothing like, nothing out of the ordinary really, but always tough to say for certain. He's not seemingly in the same headspace that he was, say the beginning of last season, where it's like he can't get on the ice and, he's getting passed over for starts. It's, pretty clear, I think, why Reimer is playing. He's playing really well. Also, who knows? It could be the last couple of weeks of Reimer's career. When I asked him on Friday, he said he's going to sit down, with the family at the end of the year and talk it over. So clearly he hasn't decided that he's coming back to play another season. He's 37 years old. So, they might be, guys in there like him. I think Luukkonen likes Reimer. He's liked having him around. So I don't sense any shattered confidence or anything from Luukkonen, but I think he is on the ice. You can see he's fighting it, right? You can see that he's not totally sure of himself, and it's been a rough stretch for him. So, I'm not, as a former goalie, I don't subscribe to the theory that goaltending is like, well, it's random, so just throw a couple darts at the board and see what happens year to year. Who the hell knows? I don't really subscribe to that myself. Like, I think, that sort of lets the GMs off the hook with arguably the most important position on the ice and the one that can make the biggest difference. So they got to get this right. I can't sit here and tell you what the exact right answer is, but I would not, if I got a call on Luukkonen, I wouldn't be opposed to it. And
I think Luukkonen's, I don't think that's on the table right now.
But I think you need to have a plan if you're doing that. I think the better plan is probably to hang on to him, hope you get better structure in front of him, or not hope, plan to get better structure in front of him, get some more capable defensemen, and get him a good running mate, like a solid veteran running mate.
That's exactly where I'm at. We're too quick. We're too itchy on the trigger finger to get rid of young guys when they go through things. Generally, I always say, like, could you imagine if like real businesses gave up on young people as quickly as sometimes fans or teams in some cases want to give up on young players? I'm not giving up on Luukkonen yet, but I'm inclined to think that insulating the position with an upgrade on the Reimer slot makes the most sense. I think that, and letting these guys battle it out a little bit, but I believe the Sabres probably are giving some consideration to having Levi spend more time in the AHL again, as well as he's playing, just so we can keep playing. And, you got to balance that, his development, and keep him playing, and versus giving your team the best chance to win. It probably is a risky proposition because of Luukkonen, because of Levi's inexperience. There's two still unknowns there. So you go out and get an upgrade in that Reimer slot at a very important position in all of professional sports, not just hockey. And after reading your piece that you wrote about Devin Levi this week for The Athletic, I'm not going to just make this automatic assumption that he'd be okay with it, but I think he'd understand it and he would just keep working, keep grinding. If that was where he starts next year, injuries can happen. You're going to need him. Maybe he becomes the one, when all is said and done. A lot can change. It's a long season. But I liked some of his quotes. I liked where Levi's head is at, where he's presently at in the AHL, and his approach. And let's see what happens with him in the playoffs this year. That's all he's thinking about right now, I'm sure. Finishing the regular season, having a good playoff, and then just go into his off season of work, and then come out and fight like hell to actually be the number one guy, because that's how Levi thinks also. In his head, he probably thinks he's the best guy. He hasn't shown it yet, right?
I think what struck me about talking to him, and I always enjoy talking to him, have since, he was at Northeastern, compared to last season, he is in a better place of wrapping his head around being there and being fully there and not worrying about, you remember, I think back to last year, he got sent down, and I think it was an injury that happened where he got called back up like almost immediately, played a couple games in Rochester, got called back
I vaguely recall. Yeah.
And I think he got a win in Boston. And after the game, he was talking like, I had a great, it was great for me to go down there, but almost talking like that was some good times. It was great to be down there. It's good to be back type of thing. And it's like, whoa, and even sort of shuttled back and forth a little bit, right? He got a few games each month, it seemed like last year. This year, he's been down there for an extended period of time. Hasn't played since that Leafs game, or no, he played against the Kraken. So different situation this time,
But,
right?
well, different situation, but what is he doing? Where is he living?
Well, yeah, he's driving from Buffalo. Yeah, which
He's still-
was actually something I was curious about as I was driving out there. Like, I wonder if he got a place. Like, it's tricky because he has the place in Buffalo, right? Like, he got that last, like he moved in there at some point, like September, like before last season.
Yeah.
Which was, now we can dissect the whole handling of Levi and everything. He has those games at the end of his first season. He does not go to development camp. He did not participate in the prospect challenge that year, correct? So it's like,
Yeah,
this was the red carpet was rolled out, so I don't think he got that place without the team telling him to get that place. And so, of course, last year he was kind of driving back and forth. This year I wondered, like, is he going to get an apartment? Now you don't want to necessarily pay for two places, but yeah, so he goes up, on off days, he comes back to Buffalo and he drives back out and stays in a hotel. And I mean, it's not ideal, but plenty of guys do that. I talked to a few guys last year about the commute. They had like a little carpool going for a little while because there was, Bryson, Clegg, somebody else was in that group, maybe Tyson Jost, Levi, Comrie for a little while. Comrie was the driver last year. He had the big car and he would pick which is probably no surprise to anybody who's seen like any of his interviews, is like,
oh yeah,
they probably didn't get to have like any music or anything in that car. Comrie's just talking
because
the whole
he's just
time.
like, yeah, exactly, man. Yeah.
But so
Goalies,
yeah,
baby.
Levi now, he makes that drive solo, throws on a podcast, does what, he says he kind of likes it. Kind of helps him reset. It's like he goes into work mode, but
He's not going back every day, right? He stays in
it's just on
Rochester,
off
like in a
days.
hotel.
He's got a
Yeah,
hotel in Rochester,
like
so
Monday morning. It's like he's going over his work week, but
right, yeah, and he gets.
What do you think that his place looks like? Do you ever think about
no? So
is it Star Wars posters, or is it like the Dalai Lama and his dinner table, and he just stares at the Dalai Lama? Like,
so
what do you think it looks like?
He paints. Well, this was the end of last year. We were talking about this, like how he decorated his play. We actually
did you talk to him about it?
Because he took up painting. So he really likes Spider-Man. So he's got like that. He's got his whole man cave. He's got an Xbox that he doesn't really use. He's got movie posters, different stuff like that. So yeah, he's figuring it out. Yeah, because he's like, I got to go back, to Buffalo on off days to like do housework and stuff. And I'm trying to think like what house, it's probably like a condo or something. Like what, real cleaning is he doing? But he's finding his way. But it goes back to this point about like these guys are figuring it. Like you have these, overhearing the stories of like Zach Benson like cooking for himself and stuff. It's like this is part of why having such a young team is like ridiculous. Like, having these guys in such important roles is, some of these guys haven't even figured out, how to properly cook their meals. Like they're just
they need to
young.
do a hard knocks, man. They need to do a hard knocks with this group. It would be incredible.
It would be incredible. Yeah, if you had a camera on Levi for his, hour 15
just
down
drive,
to Rochester.
yeah, just one episode on his drive and like his week, and it's like
Benson would be must see TV. I'm certain of that.
He is on the ice. He'd be more off the ice, I bet. Yeah,
he's playing great. He's people probably get sick of us talking about him on this show, but another great game, 2 great games this weekend. I would actually feel, I think, a little bit better about him being a top liner than Kulik personally at the moment. And It's just because it feels like that's too much too soon for Kulik. But like the role you're asking Benson to play, I think like you can see that he's doing it. And they don't have another, like what I like about Benson up there is the compete, the forechecking, the down low playmaking, like the vision, this skill set that I don't know that they have another one like that.
And he's a little prick.
Right. That too. Like he's a rat, he's a guy that's getting under people's skins. Like now Kulik, I just feel like the point production is going to kind of go up and down with him, as he figures it out. Could he do it? Look, if this were 2 years ago, I think it would be different. You'd be like, okay, maybe you give that a shot, right? Based on what you're seeing. But if this wasn't if this was a must-win season, what's next year, right? Like, how many playoff teams are going to have a 21-year-old top line center that was a late first-round pick?
Yeah, it should have been a mid.
Should have been a mid.
I mean, but they should have taken him where they took Ocelin, honestly. But I mean, they got a good one on Ocelin too. Yeah, exactly. It worked out.
A 21-year-old top line center is pretty risky, especially when he's going to have a 20-year-old left wing.
So thank you for bringing it back to the top line, because I missed a natural segue that we had earlier. Now, granted, we got back here by talking about like a Sabres Hard Knocks and talking about Zach Benson, like following him around even for the summer, going from carnival to carnival. I'm sure hopefully those days are done. He's not eating cheese fries and whatever, kettle corn all summer. But no, it's an interesting thought about that the youth of these guys that are playing with Thompson right now. And there is a factor though, and I tend to agree with you as it stands right now, that I would trust Benson more on the opposite wing of Thompson than maybe Kulik, even though I do think Kulik's a budding star in this league. He's not there yet. So it's just like everyone, let's just tamp it down a little bit. Right. But he's got it. There's some things that Kulik can do here though, the rest of this season, that maybe helps his game going into next year in terms of maturation. And there's kind of this fork in the road that the Sabres can take with Kulik once their final 6 games are done. So let's just set the timeline real quick, right? The Four Nations break came and Kulik didn't go to Rochester. He just got to go sit in the sun.
He came back pretty tan.
So he had a tan.
I don't know what he did, but he had a tan.
So confirmed. Okay. And he didn't get that sticking around Buffalo, hanging out with Levi, making the drive. Yeah.
Right.
So, and then they made the paper transaction on trade deadline day. You were there with Kevin Adams in Florida on trade deadline day. He referenced it. And I believe he said that they were going to do the transaction. They'll have the conversation, right? And what do you think the conversation really is? Is it about going to Rochester or going to the World Championship?
Because he's probably a World Championship candidate for Czechia.
Oh, 100% he is. Yeah. Well, actually, they did comment on it, by the way. The Czechs that are building their brain trust is building the team. They're talking about guys, and they commented on it, and they got a couple guys that were injured and whatnot, and they don't know the status of Kulik yet. And I'm saying, tough shit. If you want him, you're not getting
count on him.
Yeah, don't count on him.
I can tell you, and I'll be writing about it this week, but sneak peek for the listeners of the show is that the coaches in Rochester feel pretty strongly that, I mean, of course they want him, right? Like it's going to make their life easier, but they feel, Vinny Prospal felt pretty strongly about it. For, I think, reasons that make sense, right? Like he has his whole career to play on the World Championship. And not just that, but he's probably going to be on the Olympic team.
Yes.
In, next February. So this opportunity to play in the AHL playoffs with guys that he's been developing with, to be the guy that they count on, that other teams key on, that's great experience. Like winning matters. It's why it's good that Levi's down there and he hasn't really been sucked into the vortex of this season very much. I was struck in Toronto when Levi played that game. I think it was the 10th game out of 13 in the winless streak.
Yeah.
And he almost was like, it was like he was transported from another universe. Like he clearly did not grasp the weight of that was on the team. He was kind of like, I thought the boys played pretty good tonight. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't know, he just like, it was foreign to him, which is good. Like, they got him back to Rochester. And a lot of this has been, outside of his consciousness, which is, I think, a good thing. And for Kulich, like, he's been here for a lot of this and for a big chunk of the season, but go feel what it feels like to win. Like, and they have a good team, so like they could go on a legit run. You send Oslin back down there. Kozak is going to miss the last couple of weeks of the Sabres season, but he should be back for the AHL playoffs. Like, you've got a pretty good team. I know Michael Leone feels pretty strongly about, his philosophy is that, because in the AHL, you have to kind of toe a line a little bit, right? You're developing players for the NHL. But his thought is like, you have to win games. Like, development happens when you're winning and you're learning how to play winning hockey. And so in that interest, and in the look, we had the Levi conversation just a few minutes ago where the red carpet was rolled out. Last year, how many guys weren't at development camp? Like,
they had more prospects not at development camp than were at development camp.
They had like more junior Sabres invites than they had top 10 prospects in their pool.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm frankly kind of sick of that. Like, we'll have the conversation with Kulich. The conversation should be, Yuri, here's what we want you to do. Go and do it. Like, he's 21 years old. He doesn't get to really call the shots on that. Now, if you think the World Championships is a better development opportunity, I would disagree. But if they really felt that way and wanted to send him there, now, of course, if he's banged up or anything else, that's all the more reason actually to send him to Rochester. If he's dealing with a little bump and groove.
That's the only reason that he wouldn't play is if he's banged up. And if he plays, he's playing in Rochester. That's how it should be.
He could hang around the team until he's 100% ready to go. If he's got to miss a few games or miss the first series, whatever. But yeah, I think they should have him down there. I mean, this was what they did with Luukkonen a couple years ago, where they could have put him down there, and they didn't.
No.
And it was like, well, what does that do, right? For anybody, like, well, what does that do for Luukkonen? Like,
there's so much to gain by
we wanted him
going.
to focus on the Sabres, and it's like, you could have just paper transactioned him. I'm sure he wouldn't have. And plus, he didn't play for like the last few weeks of that season because Levi came up. So I'm sure he was real focused. Like, he could have gone out there and, had a little run himself. So hopefully they don't make that same mistake, because it's a real opportunity, I think, that ends up getting missed and he, like you said, he got his break, right? He got his break. He can finish strong here and, keep the foot on the accelerator for a little while. He's not going to go to development camp or anything like that, obviously. So
no. That's kind of my point about the break, is that the conversation should have already happened before the break, saying, Yuri, we're going to give you this break. We're not going to send you down to Rochester during, what was it, a 2-week break for the Four Nations, 10 days, whatever the hell it was. Because you're going to Rochester if we don't make the playoffs. And back then you could say, if we don't make the playoffs, you're going to go to Rochester. So enjoy your break, get your tan, right? Whatever. It's a great developmental opportunity for him to go back and play with those guys. They are loaded. This is his last kick in the can to play in the AHL. He can lead a team to a title. There's a lot of guys down there that he's going to spend a significant portion of his NHL career with, hopefully, playing on that team right now. Guys that might not be here for still 2-3 years, but there's guys there that are going to be in the NHL. I think it's pretty safe to say. But the window's open for the Amerks themselves to win. That team is stacked. They went out and got Eric Brandstrom. I know he hasn't played in a couple of days, and Branson's not going to be here next year. Probably going to go play in like Switzerland or maybe Sweden. I think that there's already talk that maybe he's going to go back and play in the Swiss league and live a very comfortable life for a couple of years. Maybe try to fight his way back, but probably not. Once you get in that Switzerland lifestyle, you're probably making good money over there. You're probably good. But This is Yuri's last kick in the can. You got to send him there. I think from a timeline, World Championship is May 9th through the 20th. The playoffs in the AHL will probably start in about 2.5 weeks. The Amerks will get a first round bye, so they'll start playing in their like playoff series at final week in April. It just makes sense. You know, I just think it makes a lot of sense. But I think there will be chatter. And I want to know what year I want to know what year he wants. I would ask him the question, not to give him the control. I want to know what he thinks. He like, what is Yuri? What do you want to do? If he says, I want to go represent my country, too bad.
Right.
Wrong answer. Wrong answer. And I love the way that it could set up if he does go back. When Kulik was down there, I think I mentioned this before, right? He had played with Rosane, Wahlberg. That was the line that he was on for those 4 games that he was down there. Brett Murray is swapped up for Wahlberg for one of those games. Don't bust up Ostland, Rosane. Keep them going. And then you have Kulik with like Rusek, someone else. And it's really hard for a team to shut down Kulik when you have Ostland, that second wave or however you want to do it. I mean, they're going to be a very tough out, very high scoring team right now without Kulik. You get him back, mama.
And they got a goalie.
Yep. This could be a good year, man. And you know what? I don't do this a lot, but do it like those Rochester fans really deserve it. Honestly, those Rochester fans deserve to have like a winner there too. And so do Sabres fans, give you something to watch. But they've made the mistake a couple times in the past, not getting guys down there. Don't make that mistake again. But I'm glad, I'm glad that you brought it back to that top line. We started the show talking about the top line, and then I missed you gave me a chance. So thank you for giving me a second swing at having this conversation, because I think it was important that we talk about it. We are 41 minutes in, almost 42 minutes in. Thank you everyone for hopping in. If you could please hit that like button while you're here. If you're watching on Twitter, come over. People are in the chat. I've been seeing it move, but I haven't been reading it. Matthew, I don't know if you've been reading and have anything starred, but
I've had one eye on there.
Yeah. Do you want to throw up some now? I have another topic that we could get to before we go to the chat.
Throw another topic. We got to get through the show sheet, and I'll keep an eye on. I've got a few things starred, but we'll get to them.
The show sheet is long today. We're not going to get to everything, but The Athletic had an article this week talking about they think it's going to be like the off season of the offer sheet. And I wonder how concerned the Sabres are about that, because they have a couple, guys that they need, some RFAs that they need to sign, 2 that I think are very important players. But let's start the conversation off, I guess, with that in mind. I thought it was a really interesting article, and who knows what's going to happen, right? I think I would love to see offer sheet mania. I just think it really just adds another fun layer to all of what is, free agency day, and the conversation. It adds fun to the conversations that we could have. Like we'll do our free agent show. We'll each bring our 5 guys. We'll probably each have a goalie on there this year, right? But there's so much traffic that's going to happen for you and I in this show this offseason. It's going to be fun. Having the offer sheet wrinkle in there makes it even crazy. But when I look at Peterka and Byram, they were mentioned in the article as candidates that teams are going to be looking at. And the Sabres obviously really need to guard against that. I think it is a threat. I think if you're NHL teams and you've seen the Sabres not spend to the cap, it might imply that why haven't they spent to the cap? Kevin Adams is saying, I got to save money and cap space for the next guys, right? Well, the next guys are here. They're not signed. You signed Bryson. Scratched again.
Got that locked up.
But no, I think that, man, they have to accelerate that dialogue that they're having with those 2 in particular. I think JJ Peterka and Bowen Byram, or, I don't know what you're going to do there. We can talk a little bit about other options that you might have with these players, but let me just lay it for you like this. With all of that said, threats of offer sheets, the players' value to the team, if you had to create urgency to sign one of them, who would it be in your view? Would it be JJ or Bowen Byram?
Pretty easy Peterka for me. And that is not necessarily because I think Peterka is a more important player to the Sabres. Although I think you can make that case. I think it's pretty close. That's a different conversation. But the urgency to get that done has to do with the fact that I think he will probably be the more likely offer sheet candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just get draft picks for the guy, right? So I also think they're probably more of the mindset of long term with JJ Peterka, and there's still, I think, multiple avenues you could take with Bo Byram. And it's not to say a team couldn't slap an offer sheet on Bo Byram. Look, if it gets crazy, it'd be fun, right? If the NHL takes the gloves off and starts, throwing offer sheets around. But it could be really bad for the Sabres if they don't. And this is, look, I mean, all roads kind of lead back to Kevin Adams sometimes when we're talking, but it's the lack of being proactive, being so reactive that I think has really hurt his tenure as general manager. Everything seems like it's just a little bit too late. And to get to this point with all of those guys unsigned, and now it's the cap's going up, and all of a sudden some owners are out there wondering, hey, why haven't we been doing more offer sheets? It's working out pretty good for St. Louis. They did a couple last year. Then you're sitting there and you're saying, oh man, like, you saved this cap space for this, didn't do any of the business, and now you don't want to get backed into a corner. Right now, the flip side of it would be, okay, cool. Somebody signs Peterka to an offer sheet and they've done your negotiating for you, right? And maybe Peterka wouldn't be super excited about doing an 8-year deal in Buffalo, but he gets signed to a 7-year deal, worth 7.5 or something. And the Sabres say, cool, good.
That's
Got
part
you.
of the conversation of letting another team do the negotiating for you. If
And
you
when
think
you're
that player's
Buffalo,
going to want to suck you dry in
there's
your
a lot of
negotiation with them.
layers. There's a lot of layers to this RFA.
It's not about who's the better player
no,
or more value. It's not. There's more to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of having Peterka sign that becomes valuable is, like, you can still trade guys, right? So if a team wants to throw an offer sheet at a guy, or you get wind that could be a possibility, try to get some players instead. I think that's the bigger downside to the RFAs is it's not necessarily losing the player. It's losing the player for just the draft pick compensation, and probably mid to late round draft compensation, right? Like the San Jose Sharks aren't slapping an offer sheet on JJ Peterka and handing you the top pick in the draft or whatever. So that's the scary part of it. The Sabres don't need more draft picks. And you could say, well, they could use those picks and get players. But again, adds another layer, another step. Trades are tough, as we've heard. So
trades are hard.
You got to be careful just accumulating draft picks and thinking they're going to turn into players. But yeah, maybe that is the upshot, because, like, is somebody going to get crazy and go like $8 million a year on Peterka? I don't know. I'd have to look at the landscape, see who can afford what, see what teams might be in the mix to pull off something crazy. We haven't seen something like that in a long time, like that level of offer sheet. But go down the list and, like, Byram, somebody could sit there and push you to a level that you're uncomfortable with. I think Byram is probably a good target. I mean, first of all, Buffalo is a good target for any team looking. We've talked about the haves and the have-nots with the rising salary cap. This is a chance to stress test. Oh, we've got every resource we need. We're willing to spend. Oh, it's all strategic, yada, yada, yada. Okay, let's see, right? If I'm another GM, I say, oh, you don't have an internal cap? Let's find out. And with Byram, you have a team that has an $11 million defenseman and an $8.3 million defenseman, both of whom, while they don't, they're puck movers and they're lefties. They're not, I mean, Dahlin's everything. Dahlin's a superstar, but they're lefties. They're good skaters. They're puck movers. I'm sitting there thinking, how much are you willing to pay, right? Like if there's a team that's just comfortable enough, with, like we said, I think on our last show, Chikrin with $9 million, like somebody goes high sevens, low eights on Byram, or even just 8, right? 8.5. Sabres
Which would get you a 2026 first, second, and a third.
Which is,
that's what that would get you if you didn't match it.
It's nice. It's not nothing, but it's not. That would be a real fumble.
I agree.
To have either of those players walk out the door for a first, second, third round pick in 2026.
Yeah. Although, would you trade Casey Middlestad for a 2026 first, second, and third? Because that's what you'd be doing, right?
So if you looked at it that way, you'd feel okay about it. You would definitely feel pretty good about that return. But weighing it against what you could have got for Byram, player wise in a trade, so maybe that it underscores.
It's interesting, man. Yeah.
There's that piece of it, but then what about like Ryan McLeod, right? Because that was sort of the level of offer sheet that we saw the Blues pull off last year. And so the Sabres on the surface, you look at and say, well, teams might not get too crazy because of all the cap space they have. But the smart GMs and most of the GMs would look at it and say, well, this team hasn't spent to the cap in forever. Let's take a guess at what that internal cap is, run some calculations, and stress test how much are they willing to spend on their blue line. They'd probably love to do a little bit of a bridge deal at a lower number for Bo Byram, just to space things out and delay the decision a little bit. But if a team forces their hand, he's a perfect candidate to go after. And Peterka, similarly, and just in the sense of somebody could push that number really high, because you're talking about a 23-year-old player who is steadily climbing in point production and looks like, he can be a legit top 6 scoring winger. Somebody could go $8 million for that. Somebody like Chicago.
You've seen top 6 players do really well when they leave Buffalo. There is a little bit of that, right? So
like some of these teams with cap space that are hurting for, trying to figure out ways to acquire players, right? It's so hard to do. Well, why not take a shot at it? And, do the Sabres want him at 8? That's a big number for JJ Peterka, but I don't know if it's an open market type situation or somebody's willing to really go for it. That puts the Sabres in an interesting spot.
I think it's a fun exercise to think about. I don't even have a great answer if you ask me that question, because I think both players are very valuable. I think having even though you have, Dahlin, lefty, making big money, Power, lefty, making big money, you need those guys running their own pair. We're seeing it right now, frankly. Byron playing with Clifton, with Samuelson up top with Dahlin, and Bernard Docker. I don't know if he's the long-term answer to play with Power, but it's like having those guys run their own pair. It's pretty nice balanced right now if you want it to be that way. But yeah, it's like we theorized that Kevin Adams didn't want to pay Casey Middlestad, $6 million we were saying, to be a third line center. Does he want to pay Bowen Byram, if things stay the same as the lineup was constructed tonight, to be I don't know. He's playing minutes that maybe are a little bit different, right? But it's like, is he going to be on a third defensive pair and make money that we're talking about here in this conversation? There's a lot of variables, man.
So this is a good
like the
chat
idea
here from Clinton, that I'll bring up. He says, you talk about the internal cap, but we have about 21 million of space with JJ, Levi, Quinn, McLeod, JBD needing contracts. I don't think we'll be leaving cap money on the table this season. Well, I'm glad Clinton brought this up, because it did pop into my head while we were having that conversation, is that I think we talked last summer a lot about the actions are going to start to speak louder, right? And then they left the money on the table. This summer, the actions will really tell the story. If you aren't pushing the cap next season, then it's pretty clear what's going on, right? With all these guys that are up for contracts, the needs they have on the roster. This will be the ultimate test, I think, of, especially given the spot that they're in and trying to, end this, getting a little desperate, or should be pretty desperate to end this playoff drought. I would agree on the surface with Clinton that like it's hard to look at the roster and look at the math and say, how can you not be a cap team? With some of the holes they have to fill, some of the contracts they've already committed to, and the guys that they have unsigned. But one of these guys gets poached or traded for, things change. There's a lot of variables up in the air. I'm curious to see. Probably the thing I'm most interested in seeing, come mid-July, where are they at? How much money's left? It shouldn't be much, but we'll see.
JJ's done enough to get a long-term deal. He doesn't need a bridge. But his negotiation, like his stance, is likely different with the Sabres, potentially, right? It could be. It's fair to say that his negotiating posture would be different with the Sabres than with another team, right? Like maybe he tells Kevin Adams, I'd sign a 2-year deal here, 3-year bridge. Let's just kind of do that. I'd rather do that, Kevin. And then his agent, Alan Walsh, is talking to a have in the league, right? The haves versus the have-nots. And he might sign a 7 with another team. That's possible too, right?
Oh, 100%.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I think his negotiation position changes, and the Sabres would probably love to have him. That's why I'm wondering if Kevin's like, you know what? I'm going to sign Byram. I believe in him. I want him. I feel better than I do about the player than I did the day I acquired him. And I'm going to keep trying to sign Peterka. If I have to sign him to a bridge, fine. If he signs an offer sheet, I'll match it. As long as it's not this egregious number, and then they still have to make a lot of moves. The cap thing there is going to be a little bit of a squeeze on the cap. We did the math when we were talking about, there's not a ton of dollars left, and you have Skinner at 4.444444 also, which helps you get to the cap. Hooray.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's a fascinating conversation. I'm sure on the surface, like, are you nuts? It's Peterka. You sign him. There's urgency. It's not about that. It's about the business side of it. And maybe what's not the simpler path, but I don't know. And look, signing Peterka and let someone come in and sign Byram, it goes both ways, right? You can have the same play matching whatever offer is out there if one of your players signs an offer sheet. But it's very interesting. Just the financial optics of the Sabres not spending the cap for 5 years. The cap's going up. I think GMs are going to come knocking, boom, boom, on those agents' doors for these players.
Well, look, the reason I say Peterka is because you'd rather be in the position of leverage to trade him for players. Trade him for a package that can help you next season, not draft picks. And look, this could all be nothing, right? This could all just be smoke, and teams don't actually follow through, and we only see 1 or 2 of these, and the Sabres skate by okay. But I do think it's notable. You bring up that Athletic article, and Alan Walsh was quoted pretty extensively in that article, and he is JJ Peterka's agent. Now, Alan Walsh is not shy. He's got his own podcast. He tweets a lot. He shares his opinions, and he, stopped short of sharing a on the record opinion about Peterka's situation and how that's all going to play out. But come on. I mean, he is quoted pretty extensively in there, sort of drumming up the interest in the summer of the offer sheet, right?
He was the offer sheet hype machine, man. He was the Flavor Flav.
You don't love that, right? if you're the Sabres, because you're like, God, it'd be nice if it was Pat Brisson or somebody else, somebody who represented not JJ Peterka. But this is the guy that represents JJ Peterka. And frankly, JJ Peterka's next contract is going to be one of, if not, let me pull this up real quick. Because I was looking at this the other day, and this is going to be one of the biggest contracts currently on Walsh's client list.
It's going to be.
He's got Huberdeau at 10.5 and Philip Hronek at 7.25, Sean Dursey at 6, David Perron at 4. So this is going to be a pretty nice piece of business for him when it gets done.
He's going to be able to buy a lot of Springsteen tickets.
And so it's a big summer for JJ so I'll also flip the conversation this way. If it is going to be the summer of the offer sheet,
go on offense.
Go on offense. If it's so hard to make trades,
That's right.
If it's so hard to convince players to come to Buffalo, like now, of course, the guy's got to sign the offer sheet, right? It's got to go both ways. But take a crack at it that way. Explore all avenues to making this team better. And if this is going to be one that you probably should have been trying to use, like what the Blues did, filling in around the edges last summer, like that was available to everybody. And the Sabres left. I can't get over like $7 million being just unspent on this team because you look, and of course, they're buried in the standings. So it seems almost crazy to say they're one or two players away from being a playoff team. But the Montreal Canadiens are going to make the playoffs. Like, now, the Sabres were terrible against the Canadiens, but the Ottawa Senators are going to make the playoffs. These are not great teams. That could have been the Sabres with a couple of around the edges additions, another Zucker, a right-handed defenseman not named Henry Haru, who, could play with Owen Power. You could have done it. So is that Kevin Adams' fault or is that higher up? I don't know. But if you're going to talk about using every resource, exploring every avenue, go ahead and do it.
I don't think it's a demotion, but do you look at what's happening with the forward lines? We talked a little bit about, giving Benson an opportunity. The season's kind of gone, right? It's lost. Let's see what he does. But do you see what's going on with the lines? And Peterka's, he's still playing with Tuck. Well, tonight he was playing with McLeod. What was it? McLeod and Quinn, wasn't it? Wasn't that the line they started the game with tonight? Long story short, Peterka's not playing with Thompson. Do you think there's something there with is it Lindy's sole decision, just mixing it up and trying to get balance like we sometimes always want to achieve in your lineup? I don't know.
Well, he had
Do you
him
think
with
there's
Quinn,
anything there? Yeah.
and that kind of got Quinn going a little bit.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Hey, JJ played his ass off against Tampa. I mean, he's on fire.
yeah,
I thought he had a really good game.
He did not play well against the Bruins tonight, but you'll have that. He had that juicy turnover on the first goal. Then he took a penalty that I believe that was Casey Middlestad's power play goal. So he was helping the Bruins out tonight. But yeah, there could be something.
Anything to it.
There could be something to trying to figure out, how badly do you need him?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, I don't think it's crazy to read into anything this time of year, right? They're in evaluation mode right now, and they're trying to figure out what this roster is going to look like next year, and he's one of the biggest variables. So, there
culture. I keep going back to
something.
culture, and I'm not insinuating anything. I'm not down there. I don't know anything about what goes on in the locker room and off the ice with relationships with players, but we're gonna know who they think is maybe a negative contributor to the culture in a couple months, right?
Yeah, if not sooner, right? I mean, it's, and I guess that'll depend too on. At this point, we have to assume. It's maybe dangerous to assume, but I think the house money is on Lindy and Kevin coming back.
Yeah,
I don't think it's locked. I don't think it's locked in. I don't feel like nothing would surprise me. Terry Pagula was in the building tonight, so he was probably very excited by the win. Nothing would surprise me, but there's not also been too much of an indication from anybody that things are changing. I think maybe people around the league are looking at the Sabres, I think, wondering what's going to change, because common logic would tell you that something should change, but I'm not 100% there that it actually will. So if it's the same tandem making decisions, that culture piece that you bring up is interesting, because I think that's also, to bring it back to what we were talking about at the top, just talking about how they've been playing in the game and stuff. It's part of it. how they're playing right now is definitely guys buying in. You're seeing guys blocking shots, right? At a time of year where you're thinking about you're making your summer plans, right? You're probably booking your flights. These guys probably all have their flights booked.
Back Muhlenstein out there blocking shots
Yeah.
again tonight, getting ready to go back to the hop farm.
Right. He
just
took
outside
one
of
right off his
Vancouver.
ass today.
Stuck his ass out too. He's like,
yeah.
hit that ass. Yeah.
Byram had a big one
Yeah.
that looked like it really hurt. Like Benson blocked one of Thompson's shots. It was one of Thompson's slap shots hit him, and somehow he got off the ice. But yeah, the guys are buying in. So there is an element of like, hey, it's not quite the threat I'm sure that they would think it is, but like, oh, if you're not buying in, you're not going to be on this team. There might be some guys that would be like, okay, great, where do I sign? But but I do think there is a sense of like what it, doing what it takes and trying to come together as a group and if Lindy and Kevin are the guys making decisions, this is evaluation time.
So there was a comment on one of our recent videos was like, Kris is obsessed with Peterka and he never says why. If I ever talk about like trading JJ Peterka or anything like that, it's because he's a very good player and he would be a lever to pull to make your team better. That's the only reason why. Don't leave a comment on this video about whether or not I'm obsessed with Peterka, but definitely if you're watching this or listening on the YouTube video, leave a comment in the comment section, not in the live chat here. Who would you have more urgency for? Just take this conversation into consideration, I guess. Who would you have more urgency to sign to an extension? And what would that extension be? I'd like to hear from the fans on that.
And if you do think Kris is obsessed with JJ, smash the like button.
Yes. Or not.
So at least we get something out of it. Yeah. And if you don't think he is, also smash the like button.
Just trying to scheme up ways, because you can talk about moving the guys that are underperforming and how much are you going to move the needle? You know what I mean? That's all. That's all I'm saying. He's going to get paid a lot of money from someone, but for everyone's sake, hopefully it's the Buffalo Sabres. Over an hour in, Matthew Fairburn, let's hit what you have starred in the chat.
David Dietz brought this up when we were talking about the defense improving. He said it's not the defensemen who will make the better defense. It's the forwards being shit in their own zone. And
100%.
A 5-man. It's definitely a 5-man situation. I did bring up, adding a defenseman or two because I do think there is, some insulating they can do on the blue line, bringing in the right type of, one or two of the right types of guys, somebody that can play with power in particular. If you're just adding one guy, would be good. But I think David is spot on the fact that, the puck management and the total team defense is where that comes from. And it was supposed to be better this year under Lindy Ruffin, and it was very much worse. On the topic of
forwards
culture,
have been real quick. I was going to say to Dietz's comment, 100%. The forwards have been the majority of the problem with the team's defense in recent years, for sure. But we always hear about Samuelson and, power and everything else. It's a lot of those guys that are open scoring or, they're putting the defenseman in a bad spot to leave his man to tie up a guy that a forward's supposed to have. We saw an instance of that tonight, actually, on, what was it? Maybe the second Bruins goal. I think it was Quinn's man. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's a good point, and it's something that should have improved by now, but hasn't. Mikey brings up, and we were talking about culture, getting rid of Cousins seemed to do wonders. I don't know if it's totally a Cousins thing, but I think the act of getting rid of Cousins definitely rattled some cages in there and got the attention of the players. I don't think that was the entire purpose of the trade, but the fact that they've played better since then, and they haven't even had the guy that they got, it's not a bad sign in terms of Cousins has also cooled off a bit. I don't know if you've noticed. He's not quite hitting everything that moves. And he was -4 against the Sabres on Tuesday, which was
17 and a half minutes tonight, 3 hits and a 4-0 win. The Senators might get into third place, by the way.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the fact that he's cooled off. I don't think is going to matter much to Sabres fans when he's on national broadcasts and they're all going to talk about how well he's playing and how he's built for the playoffs and all this. And I don't know, he may, have a 43% expected goal share or something in his first playoff game, but nobody will notice. It'll be an easy punchline for the Sabres. But I don't know. I don't know that I feel differently about that trade now than I did at the deadline. It's like we haven't seen much of Norris, but that one's going to be an interesting one to follow as it goes along. I just think there was some addition by subtraction there.
Cummings actually says, Brian Cummings says there is no Josh Norris. They traded for a Sasquatch. They posted a video on YouTube and he was never seen again. Probably a hoax to begin with. Maybe. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't know if we're even going to see Norris for the rest of the year. We'll see.
They keep saying like, oh, we're going to try to get him back. And he skated on Friday. I'm at the point where it's like, what's the point? You got 6 games left, right? Like at this point, why bother? What's he going to gain? Unless he can come back Tuesday and play all of those 6 games, I don't really see the point. And even that, you could probably argue he's better off just being 100% healthy, getting ready for his offseason training.
What else you got?
Brian says a hot 37-year-old backup goaltender in the top team shooting percentage in the league, the 2 least sustainable things fueling yet another offseason of justifying not doing anything. And therein lies, the urgency should not have changed because they are
on a PDO
playing well. Yeah, basically. Like I don't want to say that what they're doing isn't worth anything, because it's like it is, because the opposite would be way worse. If they had lost 9 of their last 12 games, this would be a disaster. So they've beaten some good teams. It's not a hint of anything to come, but it's also not completely useless. I am mostly with Brian here, though, that you cannot use it to justify not doing anything, or worse, throwing too much money at a Jack Quinn because he had a nice couple weeks in late March. Like, can't fool me into doing that.
You want to keep rolling through yours?
This is an interesting one. Did you start this one? I think that's the last one I had. Well, I actually had David Dietz too. While we were talking about Rochester, he brought up Wahlberg playing well as 3C in Rochester. He's turning a corner. Hellenius had a hat trick the other night, right?
Hellenius had a hat trick. It was good to see Hellenius just kind of get back in it. He's been very streaky all year, but Wahlberg has that pedigree of playing center. Didn't play much center last year for Malmo. If he did, it was like you could probably count the minutes on your both your hands. That was it. He mostly played wing last year, flipped between left and right, but has that, he's got the good puck control and he's been good on faceoffs. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of good. His skating game, he can play center in the North American game, no doubt. I love his support low in the zone. But yeah, no, I don't know. They're not going to be able to keep him there, especially if Kulik goes down. They got to bump him back out to one of those wing positions. But no, he looks. I mean, positional versatility. It's huge with some of these prospects. It's like I almost want to see the Sabres get more natural wingers because they have so many guys that can play center. Get these guys that just know how to like kick ass on the wing. Like Roseanne's like the only guy that you have right now that's like a true winger. Poltapov, true winger. Other than that, they got a bunch of guys that have a history playing center at high level. But no, I like what Wahlberg's doing. He's coming around again at the right time here. He hasn't really had many lulls in his game this year. Hellenius has a little more lulls. So it's good to see Hellenius get that hat trick. And it's kind of funny. He picks it up where the opportunity presented itself with Ostlund up in Buffalo. Kind of interesting timing for Hellenius to kind of get it clicking. I did not start that one though. Yeah. Oh, you started that one. Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of, I'll throw up Scott Earl here. They have to change the assistant coaches. Not letting Ruff bring in his own guys is borderline malpractice. And Matt, California, how much of the team's defensive woes are coaching issues? Until we have a new coaching staff, we won't know. OP and Sammy should be better defensively. I think it's a good point, too, that one we hadn't really touched on tonight about changes they could make. You know, that's certainly one, is wiping out the coaching staff. And look, they're not, let's say they bring back Kevin Adams, they bring back Lindy Ruff. We've talked before, I think last week, like, what do you sell going into next season? There's roster stuff that you could sell, right? Obviously, if you make a big move. Assistant coaches are not going to sell necessarily, but you could get a nice little PR boost with the right names, right? The right names that people are familiar with. Some former Sabres, some guys that played for Lindy. Like, you could round out this staff with, you know, some familiar faces that would get people at least a little bit excited that something changed.
There's a guy in Brantford, not too far up the road, played here for years. Would you rather get you get a defensive coach or get a guy that can fix the power play? Sabres 0 for 2 again tonight in the power play.
Well, yeah,
I'm giving you these either ors tonight, you know?
How about both?
How about both? How about both? That's the right answer, Matthew Fairburn. That's the right answer. I did have a couple starred. I was catching up. I was just talking to you and I wasn't watching the chat. So I'm just kind of catching up on starring, but Andrewsy had one that I wanted to throw up real quick. It's kind of, since you opened the prospect hatch with the Wahlberg one, I'll go here. Andrewsy says, move up in the draft to get Porter Martone since we keep winning to nothing. I had a comment from someone today that said, like, I tweeted this morning just about, hey, 2:00 today, Martone's playing. Brampton looking to stave off elimination because they won on Friday, made it 3-2 in their series against Oshawa. They lost today. Watched the game. And another guy that plays wing, like, will be a very good winger. He can play center, I'm sure, too. But, like, he looks like a guy, especially with the skating, would be more apt to play wing. Oshawa played this like a really good game today. Martone and his teammates just looked disjointed. They looked like the Sabres power play, trying to gain the zone. They were doing the drop pass, and then they were getting stuffed at the line, or they were passing it to a guy who was caught flat-footed, wasn't moving, and Oshawa would just come take the puck away. They didn't look good today. They lost 4-1. I did tweet after the game, and I still like Martone, by the way. He's had his body of work the past 2 seasons. He's a great player. It's not the end-all be-all if the Sabres don't get him. But someone said, where I was going earlier, they said it doesn't matter about Martone. Why are you tweeting about Martone? Well, I like him as a player, but they're like, the Sabres have played themselves out. I don't know. Number one, there's a lottery. Number two, there's a lottery because of the Sabres, by the way. Number two, or at least the way the lottery is currently constructed. But number two, I think the opinions of these guys are going to be all over the place. All over the place. Where we thought maybe Martone was in like the top 3, and for some he may still be. Maybe he's there at 6. We just don't know. We don't know. I think it's going to be all over the place once you get out of the top 2. And trading up to get him, I don't know. Maybe you don't have to, I guess is my point. You might not have to. We don't know. We don't know. Depends on where they finish, obviously. You know, let's get through the lottery, see where they're picking, go from there.
Where are they right now?
Well, 2 teams got eliminated today, right? I think Philly and Boston got eliminated today. First Eastern Conference teams, I think, to get eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? 6 games left in the regular season.
They're now 24th.
24th, yeah. So 8 is a stretch, right? Say that, say you're picking 8th or whatever it is, like that's a stretch. To get a guy like Martone, you're probably in the, Eklund. Oh man, fans would freak out if they took him because he's, not 6 foot. But what a firecracker. Holy shit, that kid is exciting. But you're in that range. I still think Eklund could go before Frondell in terms of those guys from Djurgården. Like it depends on how these teams, like what they're looking at, what they have, what do they want to add to their chips, their prospect chips. But Andruzzi had another one though. We have a couple months to talk about the draft. And it's funny. It's a topical name because he's very active on Twitter. And we were talking about defensive coach, Kris Pronger for defensive coach. Could you imagine Pronger as a defensive? Could you imagine just Pronger in Buffalo? Very active on Twitter. Great. Like, I wish it was like he could just rub off on guys, because then you would have 6 ass kickers
right
on your blue line. You know what I mean? But I just thought it was funny just because I run into his tweets every now and then, and he's entertaining.
I mean, yeah, he's like he was as a player, right? Just no holds bar. Like, just
exactly.
Gets after it. Yeah, I mean, you got to be thinking about stuff like that. Who can come in and you want to talk about changing your culture, like that matters too, right? You only have like a handful of these guys, like your coaches, right? It's not like a football team where you got an army of coaches. Like, those are the guys people are dealing with every day. You need energy. You need some ass kickers to start to set the tone in there. And Lindy was a start, but the fact that Lindy didn't bring in any assistant coaches, I mean, he can say it's by choice or that he was comfortable with it or whatever, but how many of us, how many times does that happen in the league where a guy doesn't bring anybody? So I'll be watching that, certainly as the end of the season rolls around.
And in the event that, and we still, I mean, I threw it on the show sheet. We're not going to get to it tonight. In the event that Lindy says, you know what, I'm tired, and he's going to change course from where we think it's going, and maybe he doesn't come back, or maybe he says, this is my final year. Like, I'm done. He might say that. It's possible. And maybe they make Seth. We talked about Appert earlier in the year being maybe elevated to an associate. There's other up and coming names that I think that we should start putting on the radar. Or just coaching candidates. Most of mine are up and comers, which some fans will hate.
I like it. I mean, I'm okay with it. I'm more concerned about a guy's pedigree, energy. Like, I want the best candidate, not the most experienced candidate. Same goes for, if you're talking about GM replacements, like, I don't need a guy that's done the job before. I need a guy that's done similar jobs, adjacent jobs. I need a guy who's a lot closer to the job than Adams was when he was hired. But I don't necessarily need a retreat. Same goes for the coach. Like, you want a guy that's been a head coach at some level, but find the next big thing.
I think that, and I don't want to go here because we're already an hour 22 in, and I want to get downstairs and watch the season finale of the White Lotus. That's tonight. Thanks everyone for hopping in here tonight, if you're White Lotus fans, and putting up with this shit, because that's been an interesting season. But what I will say this about the coach, I don't want to get into the names. I think relatability, you're a young team. You have all these prospects. I think you're going to continue to be challenged to get older. You're going to be a young team quite a bit, like, for the foreseeable future. I think relatability to young players does matter. And that's one of those things that led me to go down that path of maybe picking out some guys that maybe are in college or junior, things like that. And I trust me, I get, that's why I say people hate it, because we've had that before.
Doesn't always work.
Right. Doesn't always work, but it could work. It could work. I think that's it. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in the chat. I had a couple other things, like obviously my point on the Peterka Byram question is that I don't think it's as simple as it might be. I think there's tactics and things like that. And I do think that wrinkle of letting the other team maybe do the negotiation for you matters. And I think that the chat, as I go through it, the opinions are kind of all over the place on this. Someone, and I lost my spot, but there was a chat from someone that says, not Byram, basically. He should be a goner. Disagree that Byram should be a goner. Look at those plays he made tonight, by the way. He sprung Zucker twice. Those are really good passes. And it's not the first time. Again, it helps that the Red Sea parted because the Bruins are just in shambles right now. But I like Byram's game here. Get some righties that bring the physicality. They don't
Right.
grow on trees, right? But I know what you're saying. But then I think there's others obviously that are, I think, seeing it from both sides of the equation. They're thinking about it. So I want to see those answers from the listeners in the comments section. If you could throw anything in the comments, we like that. Helps the show. More comments.
More comments, more likes.
Yep. All right, man. I think I'm running out of steam. You want to share your final thoughts and do your plugs?
Yeah, people know where to find me, theathletic.com/Sabres. It's been a pretty busy week. I have some stuff up there talking to the Rochester assistants about Osland. We mentioned the Levi story ran on Friday. So, yeah, there's some stuff up there. There'll be more stuff to come. A story, I don't know when it's going to run. It might be tomorrow. It might be Tuesday, but it's pretty excited about. Pretty entertaining conversation I had last week that is topical to the show tonight. So I think that'll be coming out in the next couple of days, but we'll see.
Bruntune final comment for the night says McLeod is priority one. I hear you loud and clear. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, he's having a hell of a year. And he's not going to cost you as much as the other two. He's important. He is. But Bryson was priority one. So McLeod would be priority two. On that note, my plug is you can find me on X at Sabres Prospects. Been there since like 2008. It's been a wonderful ride on social media. Everyone, thanks for hopping in. Again, if you haven't hit the like button already, please do so. We really appreciate you guys coming in here on these pop-up shows that we do. Matthew and I have been talking about changing up the show a little bit, by the way. And it's going to be different. It's going to be good. Not anytime soon. We're talking about next year, but we're already thinking about next year. We hope that Kevin Adams is already thinking about next year as well. We hope Terry Pagula is thinking about next year.
Always trying to raise our standard.
We're always trying to raise the standard. But on that note, for Matthew Fairburn, for the production crew that wants to say, Matthew, I got my post-it note. Congratulations. I'm Kris Baker. Thanks, everyone, again. We'll see you again next time.